Well, good morning, everyone. This is John Dupuy, once more with Spiritual Technologies 2.0. And Javi Otero, my faithful auxiliary brain and host, is here with us. And I'm the CEO of Biofeedback Technologies, and Javi is the CTO. That means he's really the smart one, and the Chief Technological Officer. And we're here with Judith Pennington, who is very exciting. Who is one of the pioneers behind Mind Mirror, if I am not mistaken. So Judith, just tell us a little background about Mind Mirror, then we can move into what's going on right now and the demonstration.
So the Mind Mirror EEG was invented in 1974 by Maxwell Cade, a biophysicist and Zen master, who realized that, like Abraham Maslow, that if he put an EEG on the heads of the most highly developed and spiritually connected people, that he could get a template for what a healthy consciousness looked like. And he developed a really unique EEG, unlike any other that you'll find anywhere in the world, in that it has as you will see, a dual hemisphere monitoring, and started to watch what was happening in people's minds in different situations, and found that indeed people could be guided down into these optimal states of consciousness, meditation being one pattern that everyone holds in common, and a furtherance of that pattern, the awakened mind, which is basically a meditation pattern with the eyes open. And when people are in these states of consciousness, both monitored and guided by the Mind Mirror, they have access to their creativity, insight, spirituality, the lucidity and clarity of the thinking mind when it's not overwhelmed by multitasking, and even the greatest depths of the unconscious mind, the personal unconscious, and its connection with the universal awareness of the collective unconscious. So Cade found, and then his successor, Anna Wise, who was my teacher, through thousands and thousands of sessions, that people can rather easily be guided into these optimal states of consciousness, ideal states of consciousness. And we're still doing that today, albeit with much more progressed technology, which I'm sure Javi will appreciate.
I've got so many questions, and that was really inspiring, just that opening salvo, if you will. And so that started out, what year again was it that you began working with this technology, or the first folks who did?
Yeah, 1974. Cade had been working with the older equivalent of the galvanic skin response meter in measuring physiology. So he knew a great deal about what it looked like on then the ESR, electrical skin response meter, for the body to arouse. But then in 1974, someone came to one of his classes, a man named Jeff Blundell, an electronics engineer, and some new development in electronics enabled him to say, hey, I think we can really look at brainwaves in a unique and different way. And so the Mind Mirror has been in use all those years. Anna Wise developed one before she passed away in 2010. And then after she passed away, I, through wondrous serendipity, came across a manufacturer in England, Velistus, that was willing to customize a Mind Mirror to our needs. And once we were on a neurofeedback machine, we could do all kinds of whiz-bang things that we were not able to do before with the original technology. So nowadays we're using the Mind Mirror to not only guide people, individuals, into optimal states of consciousness, but to do research as well, which is a whole new, well, it's not a new frontier, because all of our work is based on, Cade being a biophysicist, based on scientific evidence, but we have the data analysis, the analytical tools now to prove what we're saying, and that's a whole new realm for us. And so people are sitting up and taking notice, and now we have researchers, medical doctors, kind of a whole new group of people. We had psychologists before, consciousness researchers, but now we have, excuse me, psychologists and people who really look at that data and need to be able to trust it. So, and we've also integrated 2 physiological meters into the Mind Mirror program. The GSR, which is the progression of the ESR Cade was using, and also blood volume pulse to measure heart rate. So between the physiology and the EEG, now all recordable, and now that we can look at with data analysis, we're just in this whole amazing new realm of consciousness research. And it's really, really exciting for us and for everybody who sees what we have.
Everybody has a brain, right?
Everybody has a brain.
Well, yeah, the first part of this was going to be the demo, and you're just very brilliant speaker, and all these questions are popping into mind, but maybe we ought to go to the demo part first.
Right.
There's just so much follow-up that we can do after that.
Sure, that sounds great. I have something running here, a session with a woman who just came out of the blue from New York City and wanted to see how this thing worked. In this session, I'll stop it so we can start at the beginning, and then I'll go slowly, frame by frame, so you can see. So this is the awakened mind pattern, where you see up in the, actually we're looking at 2 bars of gamma, which is also new to us, 59 and 49 hertz. This is the left, this is the right side of the brain. But the traditional mind mirror was looking at 38, really 44 hertz, because these are grouped frequencies, 38 to 44 in the top band, all the way down to 0.5 hertz. So we're looking at frequencies from the higher frequencies up at the top to the lowest frequencies at the bottom. And then we're also looking at amplitude and microvolts here across the bottom of the screen. You see it changing from 17 to 20 microvolts. I have it on auto attenuate right now so that the most amplified frequency bar is causing the screen to zoom out so that we can see the entire pattern. And so in the new gamma screen, we're looking at these purplish fuchsia colors up top, these 2 bars, and beta is typically 44 for us, hertz on down to this yellow bar at 15, which goes down to 14 hertz. And then alpha is 14 to 8, theta is 7.5 to 4, and well, about 3.5 to 0.5 is delta. Okay, so let me just stop this. I'll go back 1 frame at a time to a good, strong awakened mind pattern. Of course, the brain is always pulsing, and no one is entirely symmetrical. Well, some people are training to be these days because we have a self-training program. But what we see here is the gamma, beta, well, let's leave gamma out of it for now because it's really a whole new ball game. Let's say the beta conscious thinking mind, where I'm circling here this 44 basically to 14 hertz. And that is our thought process, or the intellect's ability to be logical, analytical, rational. It's actually active, externalized awareness is how Max Cade described it. So for someone who has a very active mind, you will actually see beta with an amplitude moving in a splayed way, more like this. This woman, because she's meditating, has this rounded beta, meaning that there's not as much activity up in the higher frequencies. There's more activity in the lower frequencies of beta as beta comes into contact with alpha. we have her at a 5.8 on what's called the Lesh scale, which comes off of the galvanic skin response meter. And that basically means that she is in the awakened mind pattern that we see right here. Physiologically, this is attached to 2 fingers, this galvanic skin response meter is. So we would expect to see a subdued or reduced beta up here in the higher frequencies. And we would also expect to see this alpha here. We're measuring the temporal lobes and the occipitals with the mind mirror, which gives us a good view of what's happening throughout the brain. It's not just a single site-specific electrode as in neurofeedback. We're looking at the interaction of the frequency bands, of which there are 14, now 16, and the interrelationships of the categories, which is how we see what's going on in the brain. And because we're measuring this alpha, alpha is almost always the highest amplitude category. And we want it to be because alpha is associated with relaxed sensory awareness. So when someone's in alpha, they're daydreaming, they're in a diffused, detached state of consciousness, and their beta is reduced.
So the wider the horizontal lines, it means there's more
amplitude.
More amplitude going on in that particular frequency.
Right, the strength of the signal. The peak amplitude for alpha, the classic peak, is 10.5 hertz, which is what she's got here. But this woman is also a bit of a self-commentator. So she also has a high-frequency bar in 15. In other words, whatever she's experiencing down here in her alpha, which is a bridge to the subconscious and the unconscious, her beta is up here kind of commenting on it. Not everyone does that. Most people don't, but she does. And it didn't seem to take away from her meditation. You can see that her higher frequencies are quiet. She's not experiencing mind chatter or anything like that. She's actually in the meditation with the bridge that's necessary for her to, the alpha bridge, that's necessary for her to be able to connect with her theta subconscious.
She's having a witness. That's her commentary.
She is. She does have a witness, yeah. And it's more, we talk about witness in different senses. There's a witness that some would say is actually in the subconscious mind, which is an essential being. But she's got a witness up here in her beta as well who's saying, oh, well, isn't this interesting? And it is interesting for her because with the alpha bridge and her access to her subconscious mind, she has access to, I would say, the totality of her being. Because in theta we find long-term memories, and because long-term memories are here, this is where you're going to have your personal insights. It's also the seat of creativity. It's also Cade and Wise and all of us have found where spiritual awareness is located. So for us, meditation is a combination of alpha and theta, because alpha gives you access to the relaxed sensory bridge that helps you be in touch with the content of the subconscious mind. And then down here in the purple, we have delta, the personal unconscious. That's associated, well, it is a kind of radar, which I always think is kind of interesting because Max Cade was a scientist who worked in the field of radar. And so a lot of people still today, although they're very gradually changing their minds, still think of delta as being present only in sleep. Well, that's not so on the mind mirror. Possibly because of where we're measuring, but also because we're really looking at all of these very low frequencies. And we find that delta is always present except in self-absorbed, internalized people. Because delta, as this kind of radar, is our awareness, our field awareness of what's around us, this quantum sea of light that's around us, and some would call our spirit, some would call the collective unconscious. But also through empathy, it's our awareness of other people. So we see in healers, particularly, and intuitives, a very extended or expanded delta that splays outward down here at the bottom, and can go up to, where this is 15 microvolts, it can go up to 100 microvolts. In fact, let me just do something here. Let's see. I'm going to set up a awakened mind pattern here on training level 5. That's for the self-training program, so you can see what the Mind Mirror pattern looks like. We set it up for the ratios that Cade defined. So those are the ratios of the awakened mind pattern. You can see for her, and it follows the alpha. So for the amount of alpha that she has here in this, at this moment, a 9 hertz peak frequency, she has plenty of theta, plenty of delta. But you see how this delta actually splays outward in this white outline, whereas her delta, we can take it off now and go 1 frame further. Her delta has got a bit of an upturn. So what that's saying is that as she goes down in her quiet beta across that alpha bridge into her, at this point, highly amplified 4 hertz theta frequencies, now she has access to her unconscious mind. And so when we see this kind of upturn at the bottom of delta, it means, as far as I've seen, one of 2 things. And it's that what was unconscious is becoming conscious. The information is flowing up into higher frequencies of her unconscious. And in fact, this 4 hertz theta is showing you it's flowing into her subconscious. It's becoming conscious. And indeed, that is really ultimately, if you were to ask me what is the ultimate point of the mind mirror, personally, I would say that it's to make what was unconscious conscious, so that we are completely conscious of the content of our minds and even the content of this external field of awareness.
So Judith, that would be experienced by the individual as a sense of intuitive guidance, wisdom.
It would.
Okay, this kind of wisdom voice.
Yes, deep self-connection. And a sense, and in fact, this woman I was just looking, we actually draw patterns for in a mind mirror session, so that we will draw the pattern as it happens and write down what was happening in the pattern and the time that something happened. So when patterns change. And so I was looking at her drawings, and her drawing shows that she was really becoming aware of things that she hadn't known or looked at before.
So Jude, this constellation that is called the awakened mind pattern, I guess, that was originally arrived at testing people, very awakened beings, and they started seeing these across the board, that they're having these same sort of patterns. Exactly.
It's amazing, John, because you would think that there would be a lot of variation from brain to brain, but there really isn't. This awakened mind pattern, it's the same from person to person. You're going to see a reduced beta and an amplified alpha, and this theta at a very specific ratio to the alpha. And that means that consciousness, a question, issue, or challenge arrived at in beta, can flow down across this bridge and be addressed in the subconscious or the unconscious mind, and that information can flow back up. And if the ratio is less than this, then that means there's a block in consciousness. The information won't flow, and indeed some people will hide, in terms of having something they want to suppress, because this is where all our issues are stored, down here in the theta. So sometimes alpha will collapse and the person can't get to their theta.
You know, this really corresponds with a lot of the work that I've been doing and how I've had students work with, say, trauma, for example. So the trauma starts coming out and you feel it in your body, and there's all these stories about it, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you've got to bracket that, let go of the stories, stay with the feelings, and then you know when it's released and you feel this emptiness and clarity. And then after that, oftentimes that wisdom voice will come up and really give you insights into what actually happened,
Right.
stuff that you never had before. And this is exactly just mapping that experience. It's really amazing.
It is. And that's the point. I mean, certainly guiding people as Cade did originally to deeper levels of consciousness so that they can have this mind flow was important, but it's only important because of what you just said, because then they have access to their creativity and insight for the purpose of healing and transformation.
And we have just a great conversation to come here. We have James Ripley and Elizabeth St. John, and they have so much to share that is just so pertinent. And these guys are precede me in this field of working with brainwave states by a lot, and so I'm just very excited. And let me just read the bios here, just so we can have a context of who we're talking to. So Elizabeth St. John, here you are. Here's your life. Well,
some of it.
Some of it, right. When you get older, like I told my students, you know, we tell our lives around the campfire, and it says, you know, when you get to my age, it's like a mini series if you just minimal details. But anyway, Elizabeth St. John studied with Maxwell Cade from 1974 to 1985. She assisted him with his healer research program for many years, investigating healing state brainwaves of most of the United Kingdom's leading spiritual healers. She is also a part of the Natural Dance Workshop with Anna Wise. She attended the Etheric Energy Healer training led by Andrew Watson. From 1979 until today, she's in private practice as an etheric energy healer. In 1984, she co-founded the Association for Therapeutic Healers. Elizabeth now is mainly involved in mentoring, also remote healing via Skype, together with Laura Lilienthal, who trained with Anna Wise in the Awakened Mind program. They are currently putting together a remote healing course using an adjunct of gamma alpha coherence training for enhanced perception and development. And James is an Awakened Mind practitioner, apprenticed with Anna Wise, the creator of the Awakened Mind program at the Wise Center in Berkeley, California in 2009 and 2010, assisting Anna Wise in the work and in training new practitioners. So welcome.
So who was Max?
Max was somebody who studied medicine and clinical psychology till World War II came along and swept him up. When he went into the Royal Naval Scientific Service, which awakened his interest in physics and eventually biophysics, and then he became a medical physicist.
Right.
But he had been fairly rigorously trained by his father, who studied comparative religion at the University of Heidelberg. From the age of 8, his father began to teach him yogic sitting, yogic walking, yogic attention. And his mother, meanwhile, was teaching him Edward Lear to recite on stage at local garden parties. So, you see, he had a tremendous feat. Then, at 12, he joined a Buddha choir and concentrated on judo. He was also a diving champion. And this is where his inner life changed completely. He broke his neck. So he was in plaster for a year. And basically all he could do, no doubt helped by his father, was to focus on the inner world and meditation. Then I met Max and his wife Isabel in the kitchen of the school, and he absolutely radiated humor and inner laughter And I think maybe we've become used to the fact that many of the great lamas are like this. But that was my first experience of something unusual. And then the other thing was, because we spent quite a lot of time, not just because I carried the instruments around for the healing research programs, there was a sense when you're with him that he was like sharpening your mind, like you sharpen a Japanese sword. That was my image. So it was a dual thing, this immense vitality of laughter and this sense of, yeah, the Japanese sword, definitely. Not as a weapon, but as an inner concept. Sharpen your mind, expand your consciousness. He was very into having movement in some way or other in all his courses. So yoga, we did basic yoga practice with electrical skin resistance meters, for instance, to see what exercise we could maintain in a meditative state or a relaxed state, or was it actually making us into a panic state, that kind of thing.
Right. So I'm going to jump to another question I had for you, which is those devices that he used to develop before the Mind Mirror. Tell us a bit about those. What's ESR and, you know, that other machine you told me. Okay. What are they?
In the first few months of classes, we just had little pieces of equipment that Max had made. Electrical skin resistance measured the changes in your skin via the sweat as you relaxed or aroused. Very simple. Something he did that even nowadays is difficult to find is a piece of equipment that's simple, gives you the changes, but also you can start with a baseline meditation measurement, right? So here you are at the moment, you're not in a good state to be aroused, therefore you might not be able to meditate very well, or you're too deeply relaxed and you might not be able to go into meditation easily. So it was a double measurement, one your base state and then the correlate of how you changed. Unfortunately, well, I think I can show you the more sophisticated one. This is the more sophisticated form for therapist use. On the right-hand side is where you set the baseline, and the little box measurement here shows your degrees of arousal or relaxation. The basic electrical skin resistance meter had a hand electrode. Just that was where it received your impulses, etc. This one actually had electrodes around the head as well.
And what about that other one that you mentioned, in which
the fun one.
So you could learn to go into theta, you know?
The dreaming one?
Yeah.
Yeah, the hypnagogostat. That was a little box with a button, and you put your finger on the button. We went through maybe a relaxation, and as your whole body relaxed, so your finger would come off the buzzer, it would buzz and wake you up. And then we would go to the next stage of a deeper state, same thing. Then next stage, like a deep trance state, and when you reached it, your finger would automatically come off the buzzer and it would buzz. It's just a way of bringing your attention into the changes possible with your autonomic nervous system.
Right. What in your opinion was that made him need something like the Mind Mirror? And tell us a bit about how he worked with Jeffrey to create it. Okay,
that was I think the first one was towards the end of 1974. Jeffrey came into I think a weekend workshop that Max did, and of course, being an electronics engineer, was totally fascinated. They got together. It must have been a most amazing meeting for them both. And Max eventually said, "This is what I need in order to be able to evaluate different states of meditation." And Jeffrey said, "Okay, I'll do it." And of course, it took a while. I can't really tell you anything about the technical details of it. Jeffrey put together a team of brilliant young men who didn't have anything else to do. One of them was a maritime archaeologist called John Steele. And with John Steele, actually, he and I met Namkhai Norbu in London and looked at Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche's brainwaves. It is a long time ago. That would have been in the 70s as well. So I think that was the very first, I won't say enlightened, because I don't know, but the very first very advanced teacher whose brainwaves we ever looked at. Aside from that, we also, me carrying all the equipment in boxes like the one you've seen, we would go to all the famous healers in Britain and look at their brainwaves and look at their students' brainwaves as well. And Jeffrey often came on those. I think some of the organizations of healers were looking for scientific validation and wanted to use something like the Mind Mirror, the EEG brainwave things, as a test. You know, at the end of a course, they wanted to say, okay, let's look at your brainwaves, and you pass, and you're a qualified healer. But Jeffrey was very, very against that, and so was Max, but Jeffrey in particular. So we only did that once, one workshop with the graduating class of the College of Psychic Studies, the National Federation of Healers. But you can understand why they were so keen to have some kind of science validating what was considered, you know, very weird, if not completely invalid. And I mean, Britain has hundreds and hundreds of healers. There were at least 4 major healing organizations in the 70s.
I want you to explain us a little bit about the physiology of states of consciousness. How did Max train you in sensing states, the sensation of states, and how does it relate to emotions and conscious patterns?
But that's what the ESR meters, the hypnagogostat and the thermostat and the Mind Mirror, the EEG, looking at the brainwaves, that's how you trained. There would be a lecture on, say, the history and the current research, and then there would be a breathing exercise. I have to say, Max's wife, Isabel, was a very vital part. She would move around recording everyone's changes. But one of the essential parts of the training in awareness was to learn to open your eyes so you could look at the instrumentation, mentally record what you saw, with your correlate it with your inner experience, your inner sensation, visualize that image, whatever came up, emotion, whatever came up. So we did that. The ESR basically was what happens in the relaxation process, the body sensation process. The Mind Mirror was, okay, there would be a point where Max would say, and I have to say the first Mind Mirror, you couldn't stop it to read. That was Mind Mirror 2, I think. You couldn't press a button to stop and hold the pattern. you'd achieved. So you really had to learn to control your responses. In Zen, you meditate with your eyes quarter open anyway, but we had to learn to open the eyes in complete stillness and see the EEG pattern, the brain waves, and then a little bit later, when you mastered that, you would open your eyes, look at the EEG pattern, record it in writing, record your sensations, and draw the pattern. I'm talking about a slow process over a couple of years, because of course it's quite difficult to do these things. So this is what the instrumentation did. And the whole point of biofeedback is to bring into consciousness the unconscious processes of body and brain, and if you like, mind consciousness.
Right. How would you say biofeedback meditation differs from traditional meditation? You know, like, because you said it's a really long process. You were exercising things that are not easy, or required external technology. So how do you think that would be different from someone wanting to start a practice just by sitting, for example, and watching the breath, or something simple?
Using the Mind Mirror and the ESR, it shortens the process. It makes recognition of what is a true meditative state faster.
For those who don't know, and she kind of looms very important in these bios, who was Anna Wise?
I knew her for many years before we met Max, and we were both working in this Center for Alternative Education, and one day she said to me, "Max is teaching Zen, why don't you come to the classes?" And that was the trigger. I went into the classes and never left. And Anna followed her own path, and together with humanistic psychology and Max's work, she developed the Awakened Mind program when she came back to Colorado. She was originally from Colorado.
Okay. And she was a pioneer in not just identifying brainwave states, but identifying how the different brainwave states are useful for transformation and particular tasks that we might be engaged in on an inner journey or inner practice in meditation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I have her book, and it's always been part of my...
Really, James could fill you in more on her actual work.
When I met Anna in 2008, she was a long ways in pioneering the work that she'd taken on from Max. And what her focus was in the Awakened Mind program was developing state and content of the mind and mastering that.
Mm-hmm.
Using an Awakened Mind brainwave training is about combining the ancient art of meditation with advanced biofeedback technologies. And then in her case, she became the facilitator for that, which is technically biomonitoring. The goal or the purpose for the work in her mind would be to be in the state you'd like to be in when you want to be there, knowing what to do with that state and how to accomplish it.
James, can you tell us what is it that drew you to the Awakened Mind work?
Right. So I was mentioning Chinese medicine. I was a third of the way through the program, and I started to see the relative limits to a healthy physiology, but the potential of a healthy mind. And in looking at meditation and peak performance states, I decided that I would put my focus and attention on those things. And in that process, I came across Anna Wise and the Awakened Mind Brainwave Training Program. And Anna, the interesting thing about Anna was it wasn't just the work that she had created and developed. When I spoke with Anna, I got a sense that I would learn something profound from her. and a lot of confidence that she would be able to translate the work and I would be able to learn it.
Right. And how did she use the Mind Mirror? What did you find when you started working with her?
Anna really did a fantastic job of taking the state of mind and developing the state of mind, if you're in an alpha state or theta state, and also beginning to work and develop the content and the psychology around those states for each individual. And while she worked with some of the more universal landmarks of those states that might be common experiences of alpha or theta or an awakened mind, she was also very gifted at working with the content of the mind, the issues, what we want, what we don't want. And beneath the work itself, she always had a tendency to go toward wholeness. She really applied her background in humanistic psychology and took that aspect and looked for those parts that were not so aligned anymore with the central mission of a person, or maybe creating stress or anxiety. And she looked to take those parts that had issues or tension with the rest and bring them back to a whole. If that makes sense. So state and content are the two parts to her work that were synthesized by her, so to speak.
Nice, thanks.
Oh yeah.
And how do you apply that work?
Well, the way the Mind Mirror works is it gives a person an ability to externalize an experience they're having inside. So if I'm in a relaxed state, I may see a decrease in alpha, an increase in, or decrease in beta, an increase in alpha, an increase in theta. Those states are very subtle, and without a lot of reps or a way to externalize that or recognize the shifts that are occurring inside, it takes longer to learn those things. So one of the things I did want to say about Anna, we're all gifted in our own way, but what elevated Anna in the work was she mastered her gifts. And while she had the Mind Mirror to work with that helped us work with state fluency, with brainwaves, that's the state, and she helped people work with the content of their mind or their heart. In doing that, she also applied the gifts that she had, and a lot of that came out of the challenges she had being disabled, in what she saw in other people and what she saw in herself. And the drive there that I saw was to bring back those parts of ourselves that get lost, especially those deeper parts that have quieter voices maybe, and get in touch with those and bring those to life. It's not just about learning the state and the content conceptually or once in a while experientially, but a lot has to do with doing the work yourself, especially as a practitioner, so that you're facilitating in a way that's also experiential. In other words, we may talk about where we're going to go, but I better know where we're going before I lead you there. And that's very important. So to know what alpha is like, but also what comes up there for people most commonly. And when we go into theta, what comes up for people in theta universally, but also how do we deal with some of their idiosyncratic things. So that's something I felt that really separated her from many other teachers who I worked with who had very good skill sets, therapeutic skill sets, or great educational backgrounds. What Anna was wonderful at was being present. And I think I'd mentioned that before.
Can you explain people what kind of material comes up when they enter alpha, for example, or theta, and how to work with that content?
Okay. What comes up with alpha and theta is a brainwave state that correlates to a more relaxed psychophysiological state. So memory is state dependent. Okay. So when we have an increase in alpha or theta or a shift in that, we not only begin to experience life differently and seeing it through a slightly different lens, that experience of life and the lens through which we're viewing also has some memories associated with it that might come to the top. So those things that come up for us when we relax, most commonly are the things that seem to be most important for us, at least in that given moment. And we can take the approach that what comes up in the moment is what we should deal with in that moment, or might be the most valuable to look at. In terms of what comes up for most people universally, as we relax down into alpha and theta, what comes up is usually what's more meaningful in our life. What we want most, what we don't want most, our deepest longings.
Could you give an example?
It comes down to those heartfelt longings, and usually there maybe somebody comes in saying they want a relationship, but what they're really find is they want to feel loved. So we find that sometimes those more superficial desires have deeper solutions.
What are you working on now? What's your leading edge? What inspires you?
It starts with Anna's work with the Awakened Mind Brainwave training and the Awakened Mind program. She worked with state and content, but it wasn't always as accessible to people as I thought it could be. And in working with that state and content, I think there's some room to update some of the ways in which we work with that. Judith Pennington has a self-training kit for the Mind Mirror that she's developed that people can certainly use biofeedback methodology with the Mind Mirror that wasn't available before it was biomonitoring. In terms of the work that inspires me, it's more related to the private and personal sessions that Anna did, but there's a level of working with the state and the content where we begin to look at how a person meditates and what's unique to them, and not just utilizing the universal landmarks, but also getting a little bit more into what makes things work for them in terms of meditation, prayer, how they want things, how they let go of things. And Anna did this work, but I think there's some room for some advancement in that area.
Where do you see the work being done? Where do you see this going? Yeah.
Yeah. There's been a big shift, I think, in the way people educate themselves. A decade or so back, people were going to educational institutions, and there was information that wasn't accessible unless you went to those institutions. Now, so much of the information is online. I mentioned before, if I taught a workshop tomorrow or an educational program, that information might be posted online the very next day. So what's the value of that information? And I think what happens is we have all that information at our fingertips, which is fantastic, because what it does now is it encourages more of a collaborative effort. The information's there. Well, what's the next step? Well, the next step is to actually apply the information in a form of discipline or practice. And, the research and development phases are endless in terms of what works and what doesn't. At some point, you have to decide to use one or two things and make sure they do work in your life. So in terms of Awakened Mind Brainwave training, or Anna Wise's work, or what I will be doing with the work, I think it's very important to make sure that how I work with other people and how they choose to work with me, we find a way to make sure it's sustainable for them, not only financially, but in a way that they'll be encouraged and inspired to continue doing the work. So it's just not one more thing they do. If that makes sense.
Why are you doing this work?
Great question. First of all, it keeps calling me back. That's number one. It just keeps calling. There's something about the work that I love, and it has to do with sharing and facilitating and sharing in that moment. There's something that happens in the work where when someone is in the process of exploring something for themselves, just being there as a witness or holding the space is it's something that feels natural, it feels good, and it's a gift. There's something that the other person gets out of it that they can't get without somebody witnessing it or being there for them. There's certainly value to meditating on our own, for sure, but there's also something that's lost when it's not shared. And I think that's where I fall in love with the work. The other thing that happens out of that is I always learn something from the other person when I'm doing the work. There's a self-reflection type of mechanism that happens. There's, what do you say? A remembering, so to speak, of what's important. And there's just so many universal human characteristics and traits from what we want and what we don't want, that there's I think there's a relatability there, or a humbleness there that happens when you realize the other people you're working with are wanting the same thing. And they're willing to look at it at a deeper level. In terms of my place in the work, Anna had a very unique style of education, and it had a bit of that guru feel to it. And there's a lot of teachers in personal growth and spirituality and transpersonal growth movement that do things in their own way. My sense of things is that I have I have an image of this, and the way it works is people come in for all sorts of reasons, but a lot of times what they want most is on the spiritual side, is to wake up or have an experience of enlightenment. And I always imagine that enlightenment is across the river on the other bank, and across the river is the process of awakening and that journey. And I'm not the guru on the other side. I'm who I am, and I'm here on this bank. And my gift and my job is to be there for when someone wants to dip their toes in the water, so to speak, and or if they want, how they want to get across the water, if they want to, how they do that. Do they need a raft, and what's their raft to get across the water, and help them in, if that's the case. So
you say a bit like you're a companion or facilitator.
Absolutely. There's a tremendous power in just being present and holding space for what they're exploring, and what they're being vulnerable enough to look at and go into. And the the water is really nice.
If people want to learn more about your work, how do they do that?
Thank you. Visit the website. Please come visit the website. There'll be two events a year, one in Boulder, one in Hawaii, with limited spaces, and they can come and explore the next step in the work.
Javi, anything else on your end?
No, I just want to say thanks to both of you. Quite funny that we're doing this, so funny in a good way. I'm so glad to have you both. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you, Javi.
Thank you, everyone. It's been great.